My goal is to make sure that your child's face never ends up on a milk carton. My goal is to give them the skills to be able to protect themselves in an environment where the dynamics are becoming increasingly more just predators and prey. What I mean by that is a lot of parents teach their kids, oh, just be good, just be good. And there are other parents who just don't care. And they're teaching their kids to be predators, to just take what they want. And sometimes these predators, their parents try to do the right thing, but the kids are just train wrecks. They're out of control. So my goal, 1, make sure your child's face is never on a milk carton. And 2, make sure that they have the skills to protect themselves. Doesn't mean they're going to be a street fighter or be a badass, but if somebody's going to come up with the intention of putting their hands on them, I want your kids to understand it's not going to be easy. Growth in martial arts. Man, for me to be able to watch all the little kids that have come through my program, even the ones who aren't there anymore, but the ones, especially the ones who have stuck it out, they've really put 110% in a time like society today where we're dependent on technology and the children are becoming more introverted. It isn't like it was when we were kids, where you went out and you played until it went dark or until the street lights came on, or you played in football and got a concussion in the backyard, or you rode in the back of a pickup truck. You know, kids played rough. You know, you're jumping your bicycles off of makeshift ramps and everything else. Always getting hurt, bumps, bruises, sometimes severely. Nowadays, kids are dependent on their cell phones, their iPads, their computers, and even here in Hawaii, a lot of these kids, they will go right out of the beach. They'll be in the water at the beach, and when they come out, they'll run straight to their cell phone, not even enjoying the beach anymore. And these kids are introverted to a large extent, to where physically they're developing slowly and immaturely. They're not developing the way that they need to, the way that they used to. And through martial arts, that happens. They're developing themselves physically and empowering themselves, making themselves better. That's important to me. The value of basic techniques in martial arts, traditional martial arts. In a self-defense environment, it has almost no practical ability whatsoever. You're never going to get into a horse stance to punch someone. You're never going to do a traditional low block from a deep forward stance. But it teaches the children coordination. I just spoke about that, but a lot of these children are so introverted, they don't know how to use their muscles anymore. You know, they rely on their iPhones for everything and their cell phones, and kids are introverted. So this is helping them to develop finite motor skills, coordination, balance, dexterity, timing, things that are crucial that they're just not going to get otherwise. So that's the purpose for doing some traditional techniques in my own particular martial art. Respect. Respect has to be earned to a large extent, but somebody who's already been there, they've already done that, they've lived life. In Asian culture, watch a Jackie Chan movie, everything is uncle, uncle to every stranger man that comes by. And that's because the Chinese are deeply influenced by the respect of someone who is your senior or your elder. So they address them with that respect and that title called uncle. Hawaiians do it as well. But nowadays, a lot of the teenagers, I had one recently that every time she comes in, she'll look at you like she's so tired, or she's so bothered, or her life is just so hard. She'll roll her eyes like she's just exhausted. And that's insulting to everyone in the gym, because they're there to learn. They're paying their dues to sweat, to kick, to train, to spar, and the last thing they need is a sarcastic, spoiled teenager who's lazy and she wants to give as little as possible. And she's actually resentful that you're even asking her to perform. You know, I asked one teenager, what gives you the right to come in here and constantly do this every day that you have a problem which prohibits you from participating in training? And she finally admitted it. I'm just spoiled. I want to get my way. Well, when you have a teenager that says that, parent needs to be a little more strict. Self-defense. You know, I'd say 90% of the schools across the country are probably not that high, but the majority of the Taekwondo schools have turned into family bonding, student empowerment, life skills training centers. It's not Taekwondo the way I grew up practicing Taekwondo. I tell people whenever they ask me, my Taekwondo, it ain't your mama's Taekwondo, that's for sure. My Taekwondo is the old Taekwondo that was based on a killing art. And there's actually a book by that title called Taekwondo: The Killing Art. And you should probably look into it if you're more concerned, because we're not the school that runs around with multicolored rainbow uniforms with stripes all over the uniform, and patches and badges and morale patches and stars, and the Masters Club, the Black Belt Club, the Forms Club, the Splits Club. As a matter of fact, my black belt doesn't even have rank on it. And my position is, you want to know what my rank is? Step up and ask. You want to test my rank? Step in the ring. But that's the reason that Taekwondo has been getting such a bad rap for the past 20 years, is so many people have looked at it as a business opportunity rather than a way of life. And as a business opportunity, they want to make as much money as possible. They want to test you as quickly as possible. It's unheard of to see a kid 10 years old who's a third-degree black belt. Unheard of. But you see it all the time. And that's what the problem is. You know, if you look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu clubs that are springing up all over the place now, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, they're green belts teaching these schools, and the black belts have been training for 10 years before they finally tested. That's the importance of waiting and putting in your time and grade, not some kid who's been here for 10 minutes and his mom or his dad says, oh man, he really wants it. I had a dad who came in a few months ago and told me from the mainland, and oh, my kid's got to keep his belt. They got to keep his belt. Well, what you need to understand is, if your kid's technique isn't up to par, if they're a black belt or a red belt or even a brown belt, and their technique isn't up to par with my kids who are yellow belts or purple belts, and you expect your kid to be able to line up in front of them, that's insulting to my kids. So I ask your kid, you know, what forms do you do? And they're like, huh? I don't know. You know, no manners, no discipline, no respect. Kids talking sassy to the parents, arguing with the parents. in a martial arts center. Now think about that. Kids screaming and arguing with their dad in a martial arts center. And the dad wants the kid to keep his brown belt. And, you know, we try. It's not like we want to demote anybody that comes in. But if your kid is sparring with a little girl that's smaller than him and she's a yellow belt and she's beating the pants off of him, don't get mad at the school that you're at. I'd be on the phone with your last instructor demanding my money back, because you were at one of those schools I was just talking about where everything is badges and whistles and test you every 2 weeks and got to show the progress and the life skills. Those are fake martial arts schools. Stay away from them. When you're in a fight, I don't care how many martial arts you've studied. I've seen guys over here that have actually trained with me, and now they're running around claiming multiple 10th degree black belts. In my opinion, that's no different than stolen valor. You might as well run around and call yourself an Army Ranger or a Navy SEAL when you're not. And then you say, well, in my own particular combat system, I'm equivalent of a Navy SEAL. No, you're not. But these guys, when they're in a fight and they try to do these flashy 50 slapping, striking, multiple combative combination techniques, it just doesn't work. So if you're at one of these schools, find a new school, because you can memorize all of these prearranged dance movements that you would like, but the bottom line is, when some big meth addict, some big truck driver, I don't care who it is, it could be the librarian, catches you with that wild overhand right, all the flashy combative techniques in the world don't stop that noise when the knuckles crack against your face and you hear that loud thud that sounds like a baseball bat hitting a tree just before your own lights go out or your knees start to buckle. So a lot of these people, you know, honestly, it's a lot of these schools are cults. These people train at these schools and these systems, and I had one guy that him and his son have been in this martial arts system for years, and my son went over to visit one day, friends with his son, and the dad actually puts on his gi, goes out in the backyard and does a kata, who is, I guess that's supposed to impress my son, who was a 6-time national champion by the time he was 16, 15, and the dad does a kata that he pulls out his knife and he says, you know, his Kempo knife, and he goes, "This isn't just a knife, this is a Kempo knife. This knife will cut through bone." Brainwashed. That's what I mean. When you guys are being given bullcrap like this, there are people who prove every day that these 50 slapping strike combinations don't work, that your knife doesn't cut through bone. Watch the TV show that's currently on called Forged in Fire. One of the things that they do to test extremely heavy battle knives is whack them against bones, beat them against bones, and they're doing it not to destroy the bone, but to see how much damage they do to the knife. And I have yet to see a knife ever cut through a bone. But this guy was telling my son this, and you know, my son came back and he was laughing. He was like, "Oh my God, Dad, oh, this guy did this and this and this, and his kata was supposed to show me how he could kill somebody." And you know, again, these are the guys that don't spar, or in their school, you know, they'll do their little slappity dancy thing and jump around and wave their hands and make their noises, but they're not really making contact. And when you're sparring, I don't care what system you're training in, if you're not making contact, you're not preparing to get hit. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to get your butt kicked every day in the gym, but you need to know what it feels like. Because just thinking about, okay, I'm going to do this multiple back fist strike slap eye gouge combination, well, if you're lucky enough to get to the eye gouge, that will probably work. But in today's society, especially with the advent of mixed martial arts and the UFC, that's pretty much proven that these kata boys and these multiple slapping martial arts guys can't fight. They just can't. You know, they're doing their delayed sword and their mace techniques. If somebody stands there with their eyes closed, sure, that technique is going to work. But in a real fight, you better know how to use your hands. And some of the best advice that I was given by world heavyweight champion Dennis Alexio was, if you're going to use your hands, you better get to a boxing gym. If you're going to learn to use your feet, you better get to a taekwondo school, a legitimate taekwondo school. And if you want to grapple on the ground, you better have a good understanding of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and some wrestling, both. Understand the takedowns and understand the intricacies of how your body needs to move when you're on your back. All crucial. So, pretty important stuff right there when you're learning to fight. If you've never been clipped, you've never had your bell rang, and you think that just because you're dancing around and you're throwing punches and pulling them back at the last second that you're learning something, you're learning pretty good cardio. That's about it. Testing. Belt advancement and testing is nothing more than a way of measuring your progress. That's all it is. And a lot of these schools, they want to test every week, every 2 weeks, test you for a stripe, piece of electrical tape, test you again for a second, test you again for a third. And you go through all these rituals of finally testing to get a colored belt or black belts. I know guys here in this state that they've given away black belts just to help build their school. And that's not a black belt. A black belt should be the epitome of your symbol of sacrifice, discipline, self-discipline, and your knowledge base. Doesn't mean you have to be a badass and be able to fight, though you should be able to have a modicum of understanding of martial arts, but you should understand that being a black belt is something that you've really worked for. It's a college degree in martial arts. So we have black belt testing once a year, and if you don't make it, you don't make it. And that's how it should be. It should be like college. You know, you don't just decide that you're going to graduate next week just because you want to. You don't go up to the dean in your university and say, hey, can I graduate 2 weeks early because I'm going on vacation? It doesn't work that way. You test when you test. Kids testing. Parents want their kids to get out and play every sport there is available, and they want them to progress, they want them to test, but they don't really care if they go to school or not to train. So parents, if you want your kids to really develop, you need to get them to school and to class. If you're in martial arts, how often should you train? Well, how much do you love your martial art? I try to live the principles of my martial art every day. I try to do something, I want to do something every day. It's difficult these days to get people to even hold gloves and paddles, but competitors today, a lot of them are fighting every weekend or every other weekend, especially the ones in the mainland. They have a lot of experience that they can look at, a lot of different resources to make themselves better, and they realize that if they're going to stay in that competition level, some of them are training 17, 18, 20 hours a week. You know, if you look at like the Lopez family or people who are team members, they're putting in a good 3 hours a day every day. It's almost like a part-time job for them. And I know that back when Dennis Alexio was the world heavyweight kickboxing champion, most of the professional fighters at that time would train, you know, pretty lazy training, and an hour a day. When a fight came up, then they trained a little harder. And even then, Dennis was fighting, he was training like it was his full-time job, and it was for him. That was his job. So he would train 6 to 8 hours every single day, and that was in the 90s, 80s and 90s. And athletes today, amateur athletes, kids now, I'm not even talking about adults, kids are training 3 hours a day, 17, 20 hours a week. And if you want to stay proficient with them, then if you're just coming in once a week, once every 2 weeks, you know, twice a week, you know, for an hour or two, you're not even making a dent as far as being on the same level or being competitive with them. It takes a lot of discipline. So I would say at the very least, I'd love to see all of my black belts and my senior belts training at least 6 hours a week. So that's 2 hours every other day. And that's my thoughts on that. Martial arts etiquette and protocol. Man, here's a long one. I could talk about this for days. People don't look at their instructors anymore with respect to the way that they used to. I actually had a lady that told me she was a woman, so it was her prerogative to argue with me or to basically, yeah, just argue with me, and trying to give somebody advice on how to recoup from an injury, recover quicker, or to baby an area. And no matter what you say, there's always a yeah but, oh yeah but. And for me, growing up, my master said something, that was it. That's the way I did it. And never thought that I was ever entitled to, or even had the desire to want to smart off to him or wise off. I understood that in this martial art, he was the expert, I wasn't. He was the authority, I wasn't. And I never thought, well, this is my right to argue with you or to talk back. I've been doing this for what, 6 months? You've been doing it for what, 43 years? Well, of course I have a right to argue with you and question you. And you know, you have these other guys that come in and they want to jump on the floor a half hour after class has started, and or think they're making a difference because for the last 20 minutes of the class prior, they'll put on their uniform and then they want to come out and start teaching. You're not doing anybody any good by walking into the middle of anyone else's class and then trying to offer up advice. The kids in the class or the adults in that class are going to look at you and say, who is this guy walking on the floor 20 minutes before class starts? And especially when they watch you doing techniques and they see that you really can't do any techniques really well, but you're here to give advice on how they should do it correctly. So if you're training, you should be training hard. If you're teaching, you need to know what you're talking about, because whether people call you on it or not, they do recognize weakness. They recognize faults. They'll see your chink in the armor. Earning that respect. Actually had a Navy senior chief questioned me on it last year because I had hurt some military personnel's feelings because I'm an SME, and they're supposed to be an SME even though they can't even pass a weapons qualification. So instead of trying to make themselves better, they went and cried to him because their feelings were hurt. But if you want someone's respect, you have to earn it. Now, you can be in your job or whatever, and the boss can come up and yell at you and tell you you have to give this person basically equal rights. And it's got nothing to do with racism. It's got to do with skill level. And if you want to be seen on my level, or I want to be seen on one of my peers' level, I need to be able to deliver. Not walk up and go, yeah, well, yeah, you know, this is how we do it here. And I'm like, who's we? You found a reason to quit or to give up or an excuse not to. Now, I rarely get a train these days, but when I do, I make the most of it, and I don't make excuses for it. That's just would put me in the same category as the people that I'm talking about. But a lot of these guys, they want your respect, but they don't want to train. They want to be seen as your equal, but they don't want to train. They always have a reason why they can't. There's always an injury. There's always something going on. And what that comes down to then is self-discipline. Do you have enough to stand up, put your pants on, and go through this like a man or a woman? And the training sucks. It's not supposed to be fun. Michael Jordan said, your training on a daily basis should be hell. Your reward should be the game. But yeah, Michael Jordan said that your training should be torture. It should be hell. Pushing you nonstop. Relentless training. That's what gets you to that elite level. I loved it, you know, working with the military guys. They would always try to quote quotes like Travis Haley. Amateurs practice till they get it right. Professionals practice until they get it wrong. Well, truthfully, Travis Haley said that quote wrong. It's amateurs practice until they get it right. Professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. And that's the quote. But everybody wants to be seen as an operator. They want to be seen as an expert, subject matter expert. And they don't want to train. Now, military training and martial arts training, quite different, but also similar. It takes dedication. You got to be there every day. You got to be working, doing those drills every day. You can't just say, well, I've mastered this because I graduated from a 2-week course, so I'm qualified to teach. Yep, I'm a black belt in advanced weapons training. Took a 2-week course, graduated. Think about how stupid that sounds, especially to somebody who spent 5 years earning a black belt in jiu-jitsu or taekwondo or whatever their martial art is. And think about how obnoxious that sounds to them. You want to be seen on their level? Guys have, I mean, me personally, I've fought in international events. I've fought on pay-per-view events. I've fought on some of the largest cards in Hawaii. And, you know, because you throw on a white belt and last for 10 minutes, that doesn't make us equal. So that's what I think about that as far as subject matter experts or people who want to be seen on my level or some other instructor's level. And with that being said, there's always the guy that wants people to know, yeah, I know Bob. That guy is insulting everyone in the school that is there training every day. He's the guy that says, yeah, we used to train back in the day. What happened? I quit. Okay, so Bob didn't quit, but you quit. And you guys are, he respects that? Yeah, you know, we go way back. Had a guy who trained with me 30 years ago and came back in for about 2 weeks. That's all he lasted. First thing he did was he wanted to line up in front of the current students, people who had been with me for 5, 6, 10 years. And second thing he did was walked up and told him, yeah, me and Bob, me and Bob, me and Bob. You never address your instructor like that in front of his class. And the other students are looking like, well, if it's you and Bob, where the hell have you been? You got nothing, are you? Well, I was in jail. I was here, I was there. Showing no respect to the people who were there. So, don't be that guy.